Hello there, everyone. How's it going? Welcome to a special edition here of Johnny Davis Live, right here from California. I tell you right now, these two guys are there killing me, guys. I tell you, we're having a good time here at the IKF headquarters right here in Newcastle, California. We're going to be speaking today with our IKF CEO, Mr. Steve Fossum. As I told you before, one guy who has done so much for the sport of Muay Thai and kickboxing and really MMA and so many other things across the country. So we're really excited to be speaking here with him today. Also, a little bit later, we're going to be bringing on Mr. Rodney Ingverson. He's also CEO of Blackout Fight Gear. Also, one of our sponsors of the show, blackoutfights.com, is where you can go and check out all of that great gear right there on his website. It's also on my website. I'm always excited about the fact that we have a Blackout Gear store right there on akpromotions.org. Remember, you can find out all of the events that are going on too with IKF. Always doing a lot of stuff for the sport. How you doing, Steve?
You know, I'm great, Johnny. This close companionship going on right here. I'm enjoying
right.
it.
It's always kind of fun when we get really close and everything to each other, kind of hanging out. You know, we have a kind of crazy love-hate relationship because, you know, we've been working together for what, about 20, 25 years. Yeah, you know, 20, 25 years or so, and I'll be basically trying to grow the sport of Muay Thai and kickboxing across the country. And I actually think, you know, overall that certainly you've done a great job on whatever part that I played in that. I hope that you appreciate that as well.
What was his name again?
Right.
Mess up the interview.
Now you're getting the comic side of Steve Fossum. But Steve, it's so good to have you on here today, and I really just want to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that's been going on. Tell me a little bit about the organizations that you oversee here at IKF.
You mean like all of them?
Yes.
Well, we have the IKF, obviously, ISC, which is our MMA group, IAB, which is our boxing group. We have a belt and award company, and pretty much covers the general line.
Right. A lot of things going on. People actually, I think, will be very surprised here at the IKF headquarters how nice it is. You know, it's really nice. You got all of this memorabilia and stuff like that on the walls. You know, as you kind of look around though, and you see some of the things, what are some of the things that stick out in your mind about some of the memorabilia that you have here in the office?
The train. That's
right. Well, there's a train track that goes right across here, right? But what else? What else sticks out? Some of the memorabilia that maybe you've had signed by some famous people.
We just don't have enough wall space. We need to put more stuff up. So
right.
I don't know. I mean, everything's valuable. I mean, we have stuff from local people, stuff from other countries, and I mean, nothing. There's not one thing that probably just stands out individually because it all means the same, and all played a part.
Right. Well, you've met so many people. Go back a little bit to the beginning. I've heard you tell this story many times about the IKF and how it all got started. Give us a little quick summation, if you will, of how it all got started here at IKF.
Well, Dan Still, as you all guys know, Bam Bam, he used to train the kickboxers up here at my karate school, and he had trained fighters, and we were going back and forth to events. And there's a lot of stuff that played up to this moment I'm going to get to of the things that we had to deal with. Mainly, a lot of it came down to a simple organization of when we had fighters on an event, we wouldn't know who the next step was for those fighters to fight to get to a title or to get highly ranked. Then we found out that there was no rankings. At the time, we were working with WKA, and we were sanctioning our events with them. And we contacted WKA basically and asked, well, who's the next in line for our fighter to fight for whatever.
Right.
And at that time, Howard Hansen was the one who was in charge of WKA. And he actually said to us, well, it doesn't matter to me because we don't keep track of amateur titles. And Dan and I were kind of like, oh, well, how do you know who holds what title?
Right.
And he basically said, well, you can do whatever you want. We don't know. So jump, forward to that. And some other issues that popped up in there in regards to the leadership of WKA. And we're sitting around at Denny's restaurant right across the street here that night. And Dan and I were talking about, well, why don't we try to do something ourselves to start a ranking system going, at least in California. So we started off with saying, well, we're going to make the California Kickboxing Organization. And I said to Dan, I go, well, what if we grow bigger than California? And he's like, oh, okay, that's right. Let's call it the West Coast Kickboxing Organization.
Right.
What if we grow bigger than West Coast? So that went to US and went to North America. And we thought, well, let's just cover the world just in case.
Right.
We end up going bigger than just California, I guess. And so we decided that's where the name of the IKF came in. I can't remember how we kicked back on different letters and stuff like that. And Dan was drawing on a napkin as we were talking and slid this napkin over and said, and let's do this for a logo. And he pointed out how this logo was going to be and how the different figures were on there. And I remember looking at him across the table and I go, if we do start an organization as young as we are, people are going to look at us and we're going to laugh. They're going to laugh at us.
Right.
And I'll never forget Dan. He looks at me and he goes, so I go, okay, well, if you're in, I'm in. Let's go ahead and get it started. So that's pretty much how things started, was at a Denny's. And, it went on from there. And we did, we never really took it fully seriously because I had my martial arts school at the time and had about 470 students. I was busy there. Dan was busy with training fighters and his own stuff going on. And it didn't really kick off till probably around, 96 or 97 when the internet became something. And when we were doing probably less than a dozen events a year. And when the internet came about, all of a sudden everything exploded. We went from doing only a few events to, tons of events, and the rest is kind of history, I guess. So,
well, I think it's a great story, but you've accomplished so many things since that time. Since that time, though, about how many events would you say? And I know it's a tough question. I know, because you do them worldwide, and that's the first question: is about how many events do you think you've done since that time? Guess.
Done since that time? I couldn't tell you how many we've done, but I mean, we
thousands
with IKF, ISCF, and the IAB, putting them all together. Currently we do a little over 2,000 events a year. So
right.
I know that, but as far as how many we've done, I couldn't even tell you.
Well, what about name some of the countries that the IKF is currently operating in?
Well, we have Carl Sams, who really runs things over in our UK group over in United Kingdom. So he runs a lot of stuff over there in England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland. And we have Pete Foley over there and who works at the Ireland group. Colin Payne, who used to be with Carl over there. That's a big connection over there. We have our Mexico group, of course, with Felix Perez, who's been running things up there. We have our Canada group. In regards to that, the mainland Europe countries are run by individual reps that are running those particular countries. Andre Thomas runs things over in parts of Asia with Singapore and with Malaysia and things like that over there. So, I mean, it's the number of countries. We could sit here for a while and I can name them all off as far as that goes. But a lot of the events we don't list on our events page because they're run by the individual countries too. So you don't see all of our events on the event page, basically just the ones that the promoters really want to have on there and, focus on those because we have the two events page. We have the California one as well as the open one, which is mainly our world event. So.
Right. Well, I think, like I said, it's definitely the name is out there. I think that when people say IKF, I mean, people really relate to something that's going to be of quality because you certainly put that out and you have high standards about exactly what you're doing. But fast forward, there was at one time, I remember when the MMA was really hot, right? It was like really, really hot. People think it's hot now, but at one time it was really, really hot. What's changed over the last 5 to 8 years?
Well, to begin with, the ISCF was the very first sanctioning body, and that was in '99. It was, we were the first ones to ever create a sanctioning body for MMA, because prior to that, promoters selected their own officials, they did their own, titles and stuff like that, and it was never a regulatory body for MMA because the states hadn't got into it, and USA was pretty much the only country that was really doing MMA when it first started back there, and it's still not fully caught on over in Europe, you might say, but so that was in '99, and it didn't explode until UFC got their consistent show on Spike TV, and when that happened, MMA exploded almost instantly because it was on a consistent basis on one night that everybody was tuning into, and it was a sport that everybody could follow. And that was around the 2004, 2005 era. I can't remember exactly when their show came on. And
but it helped out everybody, did it not?
Pros and cons. We lost, like every organization lost, a vast majority of promoters in the U.S. moved to MMA because there was so much money in it.
Right.
And we went from doing probably 50 to 60 MMA events, a year worldwide with ISCF to, I mean, just almost overnight shot up to like 200 or 300, I think it was in just the US per year. So MMA exploded when the Spike TV UFC deal came out. Well, then what happened was a lot of the ways the commissions started dealing with the amateur sanctioning bodies, especially, and the way UFC has structured some of their stuff and some of the larger promotions that have been bought out by the UFC. From what we've seen, MMA has really taken a downturn within the last 5 years, and kickboxing and Muay Thai has started to climb kind of back up. There's been like a resurgence, you might say, at least here in California, with the kickboxing and the Muay Thai. And not so, I mean, I think that where the sport's missing the most is probably in the Midwest. As you know, you're doing a lot of stuff over on the East Coast. There's a lot of stuff going on up in the Northeast. But MMA still is in certain parts of the country where it's still thriving, you might say, but not nearly where it was back in around 2005, 2006, 2007, along in those areas. But I think everybody's trying to say, well, Muay Thai is growing so great. And it is. I mean, it's growing really good in different parts of the U.S., you might say. There's also international or glory rules, people call them, or K1 rules. But it just depends on what region you're in or what state when you say, oh, well, this style is growing or that style is growing. So it's big in some states, but it's not as big over here. So it just depends on where the individual is that's talking about it, you might say.
But in the state of California, which right now you are the chief regulator for amateur kickboxing, right? How is MMA as far as being busy? How is it in comparison to Muay Thai kickboxing events and MMA events? Is it more or less?
Well, in California, Camo, JT Steele, he runs the MMA portion in California, and I still think they're way busier than us. There's still a lot more MMA events than there are kickboxing and Muay Thai. Again, going back to MMA is on TV all the time. You don't see enough kickboxing consistently to get a crowd really behind it. You see Lion Fight, you see Glory, some of the bigger shows that are on regular TV, but you don't see, some of the smaller shows like Triumphant as a promotion that's coming up and getting bigger and bigger as a pro-am promotional company. And if we had kickboxing or Muay Thai on a consistent basis on TV, I think it would grow the sport tremendously, which is what helps you MMA fighters and MMA promotions, because there's so much MMA all over TV, whether it be UFC or Bellator or King of the Cage or and all those different promotions, Gladiator Challenge. There's so many shows that have their own TV contract that are out there. MMA still, without a doubt, thrives over kickboxing. In fact, if you looked at the kickboxing numbers in the state of California, especially on the pro level, I think out of all the events that are done in California, I think kickboxing and Muay Thai they maybe take up less than 5% of the overall gross number of shows that the California State Athletic Commission does. They do a lot of pro boxing, a lot of pro MMA, but very, very little kickboxing and Muay Thai.
As the regulator here for amateur kickboxing, though, and I know you deal with a lot of things that really tick you off. But what are some of the biggest challenges in helping regulate the sport? And because from where it was to where it is now, I mean, IKF has done a great job in bringing these events and making it safer for fighters. But what do you think, in your opinion, are some of the biggest strides?
The haters.
The bigger challenges, I should say. Right.
Well, I mean, before when the IKF was just a sanctioning body, when we regulated in states as well, we'd walk into a venue and people were glad to see us because we're going to be having a title fight there or whatever it was. And, nobody likes the discipline of regulatory issues. No one likes to be told what to do. And we walk into a place now, it's like, the law's here or whatever. So it's kind of like,
so the love goes away.
Yeah, there's not a lot of love
there. Right.
And I don't know if it's, I don't know how you would call it or classify it or whatever, but they don't understand that we're regulated on top of us by the California State Athletic Commission. So what the commission tells us to do is handed down for us to regulate over the fighters, trainers, promoters, officials, and all that kind of stuff, basically. So when we go to an event, we're basically the same as the California State Athletic Commission does we're there to regulate the health, the safety of the fighters, the fairness, all those kind of things and everything. So there's a lot of challenges of there's going to be people out there saying that we don't do it correctly or don't do it right or don't do it good or whatever. And how I kind of look at that is I think what I have done the same thing, and it goes just like in a disciplinary situation. I always ask myself before someone has to be disciplined on something. I say, would I have done that? And 99.9% of the times my answer is, well, yeah, probably. Okay. So my second point is, well, how would I want to be reacted to or disciplined or done, handled in that situation? So the stuff that we're getting now is all stuff that myself and Dan and other people that are associated with the IKF, these are all things that we have already done as well back in our 20s and 30s and things. So when we get a lot of if I use that term, haters or whatever, it's stuff that we would have probably done too towards other organizations that we may not be working with. If you're not a part of it, then it's terrible. But all of a sudden, when you are a part of it, it's like, oh, it's great. It's like I get people all the time saying, oh, I hate glory, and then all of a sudden when they get a fighter on, it's like, oh, glory's the greatest thing, or would it be or triumphant or lion fight or whatever. It's the old theory that I call, if you're not a part of it, you hate it.
Right.
Whereas when you become a part of it, all of a sudden it's the greatest thing.
But the thing about the IKF is that everybody is IKF. I mean, anybody and everybody. You don't exclude people from being a part of the IKF organization.
And here's the part that people don't understand. People think that we say, well, they're IKF fighters, that are IKF trainers, IKF, and they're not. Right. Okay, because they're not our fighters. They're the coaches' fighters. Okay, they're not necessarily our promoters because they're their own promoters. We're kind of like the people no one really sees. It's kind of like the old train on the tracks thing. If everything's running great, no one knows that we're even there. But if there's something happens and all of a sudden we pop up, it's like, well, who are you guys? What are you guys doing here? And we're not there to overpower or be overbearing towards anyone. We're trying to keep the train rolling on the tracks and let the promoters do what they want to do to be successful. Let the fighters and the trainers do what they need to do. Let the officials do their job right. We know where the value is and who's the most important people in that chain. It's not the IKF, because sanctioning bodies are a dime a dozen. It's not the trainers or the fighters. They're a dime a dozen. It's the promoters, because without a promoter, none of us would be here. And a lot of people don't see that. I hear fighters all the time, oh, well, if we weren't fighting for these people, we wouldn't, there wouldn't be no show. And I'm like, well, let's think about that for a second, because the reality of it is, if there's no promoter, there is no show. It's no different than if there's no venue, if there's no concert or concert hall to have it in, you're not going to have that show. Right. So a lot of people need to understand that without a number of promoters, then none of us would be busy. So the promoters in any aspect, just like, a team owner in a football team. Okay. That's the most valuable part of everybody, is having that person that's going to be able to bring us all together so we all get a chance to perform and do our thing, basically. So we have a lot of great promoters. We've only had a couple of promoters that haven't followed the rules, or we've had to kind of put our foot down and say, hey, you need to do this or do that. Right. But, there's a lot of risks that promoters put out there that people are not aware of, not just financial too. I mean, they're putting their name out there on a product to try to make sure it's a good product, to make sure the matchmaking is good. Whether they're doing their own titles, we call them promotional titles, or whether they're doing IKF titles, they're putting a lot of risk out there to build the sport. So that's really where the sport grows, is where is the number of promoters that you have that are doing their job and doing it good and presenting a great show. That's where the sport's going to grow. So.
Well, you have to make, and when you talk about sometimes disciplining promoters, sometimes you have to make some tough decisions in this game. What are some of the tougher decisions that you've had to make, being basically the commissioner for amateur, that maybe you might have regretted, and maybe that might have had a great impact on the sport here in California?
Well, I don't know if there's anything that we would regret, because we really try to think out our decisions when they're done. And when we don't have the right answer to what to do from a disciplinary standpoint, my first call is to the commission. What would you do in this situation? Right. How do you want us to handle it? Because again, we're a representative of the commission. We're a leg of them. So if we do something stupid or wrong, we're actually affecting them as well. And the last thing we want to do is let the commission down, who's put their trust into us to run and regulate things. So when we make a decision, we make it in the best interest of the commission first. Right.
who you have to answer to.
The IKF
Right.
second,
Right.
you know, so we don't put ourselves ahead of the commission. We don't put ourselves ahead of the sport. Basically, we're just the speaking part, you might say, or the action part
Right.
of what the rules and regulations have to be, basically. And sometimes, well, a lot of times those things that we have to discipline people for are the regulatory things we have to put our foot down. They're not popular decisions. I mean, we're not making people happy,
Right.
you know, when we say you can't do this or can't do that.
Right.
You know, obviously we're making people mad, saying, oh, well, you know, well, so and so will let us do it, and we're like, well, you know, we're just doing what we were told to do. And you know, you can't have a guy 20 pounds difference in weight fight this guy over here, and or whatever the rule or regulation be. And it's easier for people to be upset with us with stuff like that, but we're trying to do our job and do it correctly. That represents not just the front office of the commission, where people like Lee Palmer and Derek Inns and Andy Foster and all those guys are, not just those people, but the commission board as well, that we ultimately all have to answer to, because we're a branch of them too. We're representing their best interests, and they put their trust in us to make sure that we follow those rules and regulations, and not just run amok and let people do whatever they want to do, basically.
Right.
So
right.
You know,
you're the front guys. You're the guys that got to go in there. You know, like in the military, they send in that first.
Well, you know. How we kind of look at it is the commission board is the main chief, of course. Okay, then we have the office. Okay, and then we have our office here where we're sitting here today. But our soldiers in the field are the people that go out, and they're the ones hands-on that work the event, whether that be me out there working an event, or like Dan and Elaine, for example, who are out there working an event.
Right.
Those are the soldiers that, in our opinion, are the ones who are the ultimate decision makers. They're the ones who are right there in front of everybody, whoever's working that event, that they're the ones that have to come and do things the right way, basically, or make those decisions, basically. And of course, us here, or the commission at the office, or the commissioners, we're the support staff that supports whatever that action is going to be.
Right.
You know, so
Well, you know, just want to change gears here just for a little bit. You know, you also started something over 20 years ago that has been a great incubator and a great a way of recognizing fighters for their achievements, which is the IKF World Classic. Tell us a little bit about the IKF World Classic, and why has that been such an important tool for the sport?
Well, Joe Taylor and I were the first ones who started discussing the idea of doing the tournament, and the reason and how that came about was I was here at the office constantly talking to people about, how can I get a title shot? I want to earn a title belt. And I kept telling everybody, well, you have to obviously know a promoter who's willing to host a title and put you on there. And I'll get a fighter or trainer saying, well, my guy's only had 2 fights. You know, when can you get a title fight? I go, well, you got to have more than 2 fights to get a title fight. So I would get all these calls, or I'd get a call from somebody in the middle of nowhere, you know, middle of Wyoming or middle of Iowa at the time, that people didn't know about, and say, you know, hey, no one's calling me for a fight. How do I get an opportunity to fight for a title? So as all these things were accumulating, it basically came down to, I asked Joe, who was the marketing director for Ringside Inc., who was the original partner with us on the World Classic. And I asked Joe Taylor, I said, well, how'd they grow boxing? And he explained to me all the situations with, for example, how they did boxing in regards to the regional events, qualifying for the nationals. Because at the time when we started the IKF tournament, it was a national tournament.
Right.
So our goal was basically to provide regional tournaments, which we had various regional promoters all over that in the different areas of the U.S. And then those fighters that fought on those would get, you know, qualifying positions to go to the U.S. Nationals. So the reason we started the tournament was to provide an opportunity for those people that nobody knew to come to a tournament and actually win a title fight. So we've had people that's come to the tournament that have been 0-0, for example, who have won an open title, you know. So it was basically to provide an opportunity for the fighters who were not getting those opportunities, you know, to fight, you might say.
Well, you know, a lot of people have asked the question before, you know, about, you know, we did the West Coast Classic some years ago. And the World Classic is over in Florida. What about the World Classic ever coming to California?
I'm not sure if we would change the location of the World Classic, although there's been a lot of discussion we've had in-house about it. We were all set to do a West Coast Classic this year, and we were going to have it down at the Burbank Marriott in Southern California. But one of our top promoters, the only date that they gave us was 2 weeks ahead of when one of our top promoters, Dennis Warner, and he had a show in they gave us a date, but 2 weeks later was going to be one of his shows.
Right.
So out of respect for Dennis and his promotion, which they do a fantastic job down there, we just said, well, we're not going to jump in front of one of our existing promoters. It's just not the right thing to do. We also had another date in San Diego. Happens to be that Dennis promotes in San Diego as well.
Right.
And we didn't want to jump in front of his date there, which was that date there was only a week apart.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to opt out for the spring of this year. We're looking at possibly fall of next year. If not, for sure, we want to, set a date for the following for spring and to bring the West Coast Classic back.
Sure.
And whether it's called the West Coast Classic or something else, we don't know yet. We haven't got to that point.
Right.
But as far as moving the tournament, Orlando seems to be a really good base. We have a hotel back there that really works good with us back there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a family destination. The families come to watch their fighters fight because there's stuff for them to do in Orlando. We used to have the tournament in Iowa, and there wasn't a whole lot of reasons for someone to come and watch a couple hundred fights when we had our tournament there. That's in '99 we started the tournament there.
Right.
And it was the only tournament around. It was the only one doing something like that.
Well, as you well know, I used to promote here. I love to promote. I love California. Every time I get off the plane and come here, it kind of still feels like home. I have to call my wife back home. I said, listen, every time I come here, it seems like home. It feels like home. So maybe I'll promote another event here. I was kind of looking around today and talking with some people, about the possibility of bringing an event back here and stuff like that. Would that be okay with you if I did that?
Maybe you should just move back to California.
Oh, well, that might be a little more difficult than it might seem. But I enjoy California. It's a great place to promote a fight. So, hey, who knows? AK Promotions might be doing something back here real soon. We'll see what's going on. Steve, I want to ask you a question as we wind down here for a moment. You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think I kind of have an idea what you might say. But if you had a magic wand, right, and you could wave that magic wand, what would be your wishes that could happen for the sport of Muay Thai and kickboxing in this country?
Well, that's an easy answer. The sport needs to do what UFC accomplished, and that was get on a TV program or a TV channel or however you want to call it, and it needs to be consistent. Because when it's been on before, even now, the programs that are on now that have whatever fight event is on there, they're not a consistent time. And what helped MMA grow so big was the fact that they had that Spike TV show, and I think it was on a Thursday night, so it was a night before people could go back to the water coolers at work and talk about the fights and everything. And it was on weekly every single week.
Right.
And kickboxing and Muay Thai has never ever had to be on a big network. There's been a lot of little network stuff. We did our TV show back in the Southeast, for example, years ago, but it was on a smaller program.
Yes.
So if we can find a spot for kickboxing or Muay Thai or for one program to be on at a consistent time frame. ISK did a great show years ago, for example, with Corey and Mike Sawyer. But the problem was ESPN would never give them a consistent time. They'd be on like at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the morning, and you can never find it. So you kind of like came across it by accident, but here we had a great show that was providing kickboxing or Muay Thai, however you want to look at it, but it wasn't on consistently. So you're constantly looking for it, basically. And back then when they had their show, a lot of people didn't have recorders. They couldn't record the shows when they came out. But even Glory and line fights right now, they have a great product and a great show out there. Problem is you're always looking at where to find it. And so I think the biggest thing that would help the sport, and it is the magic answer. It's a simple answer, but extremely hard to accomplish. But the one answer to advance the sport at all would be to have that, one show, that happens every week that we know exactly where it's going to be, exactly where the time frame is, and all that kind of stuff. And if we had that, it would draw more people's attention to the sport and give them more of an idea about it in a way to educate them as well. So
I'm going to twist off that just for a moment.
Okay.
So if you won the lottery, let's say if you were the man that had all the money, you hit that big super lotto and you were the big winner, like that 786 million or something that somebody just won.
Like
yeah. Let's say, how would the sport of Muay Thai and kickboxing change if you were the person that won that money?
Well, someone in Wisconsin won it, so
Right.
maybe we should call Duke Rufus to see if it
Right.
was one of his people. But
right.
who, by the way, is one of the best commentators I've heard on TV.
Oh,
so,
nice.
so if Duke won it, we could say, "Hey, Duke, you know, it's time for you to start a TV show."
Right.
But
what would you do
if we had an influx of money or something to do with that? I would really try to push some network to take us on, because that's ultimately how the only way Spike even took on UFC. UFC had to pay them for the time. I think the raw structuring of what happened on the UFC deal was they paid Spike for the first series, and then Spike gave them commercial time, I think it was, for the second one, or however that worked out. And then the third one, they signed a big contract, and the rest was history. So UFC had to prove themselves. Well, what people don't realize is, to prove themselves, a lot of people think, oh, well, Dana White and the UFC people just came in and were sudden successes. Okay.
Right.
They don't realize that the UFC, I mean, let's face it, they were what, $50 million spent and in the hole before they even got the Spike TV contract. So they had people that believed in what they were doing. Dana obviously believed in what they were doing, and they just happened to have someone who had no problem putting that money in over and over again, hoping that someday they would get to the point they're at. I don't know if we have that kind of a person who's willing to do that for kickboxing or Muay Thai, because that's a lot to invest. But we would need someone on a production end to be able to put the money in, to build the shows, to be able to put them in, to show a network, hey, this is what we're capable of. And again, like I said, there's Glory out there. There's Triumph that's out there. Dennis Warner does a great show that he does down in the Southern California area. Lion Fights is doing their program as well. So it's been proven in concept. But I think what the networks are looking for is more of a consistent basis.
So what is it? What do you think that seems like every time there is an investor that comes in, they want to create their own thing? They won't come in. They won't come in. You've been around with IKF, what, 20, 27, 20, I don't know how many years. And they never seem to go with somebody who's been consistently building and working in the sport. Why do you think that is?
Well, if you're referring to sanctioning bodies, I won't get political on you there, but the first thing that pops in my mind when you say something like that is what Chuck Norris did with the WCL. If Chuck Norris, he had a $10 million investment that he gave to his brother Aaron, and said, we're gonna do something different. They decided to do the platform concept. I understand their theory there, that they wanted to stand out from the others, but man, if I would have been advising Chuck or even discussing anything with those guys, if he'd have put that $10 million into a regular promotion in a boxing ring, just like the sport is,
stretched it out,
he'd be the Don. He'd be the Don King today of kickboxing and Muay Thai, because that 10 million could have went a heck of a lot farther than it did when they did their WCL. And I'm not saying that WCL was bad. I mean, it was exciting.
It is what it is, right?
But a lot of people that I ever talked to when they were doing it, a lot of these people, if they would have watched it, they would have realized it's not point fighting.
Right.
But when people would see it, they thought, well, what is this, point fighting? They're not doing it in a ring, you know. But
that's my point. They take it every time we get a big investor. Yeah. They go and try to create something new, as opposed to going with someone consistent like the IKF.
Well, here's an example. For example, with the IKF, if we had the mega investor out there that came to us and said, "Hey, IKF, we have $100,000 or $1 million or whatever that number is," and said, "Can you get us some exposure?" What we would do, and I've talked to several of our promoters about that, is if we had a sponsor that came to us and said, "You're going to be the caretaker of this money," we would take that money and use it towards every single show we do in California, because the IKF funds itself. We don't need a sponsor to come pay my check and buy me a new car. Okay. I mean, I'm not one of those people, and we've all both seen them where someone gets a lot of money and they spend it on themselves rather than. There's so many people that don't want to look at the long term. Okay. Obviously the IKF has been in the long road. They're all into the I want to get rich and do it now. I'm the 7-Eleven and I want to get it done now. So our whole plan is, if we ever to ever land a sponsorship, we would take it and take that, you know, the donators' money or sponsors' money or however you want to look at it, and we would put X number of dollars in this show, X number in this show, X number in this show. So we get a call from Joe Promoter and says, "Hey, Steve, I got this big promotion I want to do. I want to do a pro-am show. This is what it's going to cost. What can the IKF fund, along with whatever this sponsor's name is, what can they put into our show? So obviously a smaller amateur show would not get as much as a pro-am show, for example, but it's a way to kind of
feed everybody.
Well, manage the money, I guess is probably what I'm trying to say, and manage that money to where that fund is put into the sport rather than into someone's pocket. Because if we're all if all of us are not making a living right now, what are we doing here? So it's kind of like, if someone came up and said, here's $1 million. It's not like I'm going to say, well, I could use a new pool.
Right. You put it in the sport. Right.
I mean, if the sponsor wants us to do something with their money, let us manage that and let us put their name on every single show, whether it be in California or nationwide or whatever it is we're working with. Let us help them build their name through the number of shows that we have out there, so it can enhance the sport as well as enhance that sponsor, if that sponsor ever came about. But that's the way, I think that's the way from a team effort the sport has to be grown, because what happens is when you get one sponsor that goes into one show, and I've seen this too many times, rather than that one show spreading out that money, that they get this big, influx of money, they try to do it all in one show and it's gone.
They pay one person $300,000 or something. Oh, that one person getting it, but that's it.
What was the MMA group? Was the IFL, the International Fight League?
Yeah.
Great concept. Great idea. Problem was their management of the money was extremely terrible. I mean, they were paying everybody exceptional fees. They were paying all the they paid the trainers, I think it was like $30,000 a year. They paid, each fighter was on a salary.
It's too much.
And on top of the salary, when they fought, they paid them a purse on top of that. So the concept, the idea of the team versus team was great, because a lot of people bought into that. And we've actually thought about doing something like that here in California, have team competitions and stuff. The idea of that is great. How to fund it and coordinate it and make it work is a whole different thing. But
it reminds me, I'm sorry, but it reminds me as we wind down, it reminds me of, I just saw this one championship. Have you heard about the one championship?
Oh, yeah, I've seen a lot of it.
They have like basically kickboxing with MMA gloves on. You did that.
Well, we have that in our rule set.
Right, but you did that. Didn't you do something like that an hour?
We did a test run of it. It wasn't an actual event. We did a test. It was on the ISCF tournament. For example.
Well, there's just a lot of things you have not done. But, I know we could go on and on. We're going to divide this up into 2 shows today, because, we have Mr. Rodney Inkbush waiting in the lobby there for us for our second edition of Johnny Davis Live today. Mr. Steve Fossum, I tell you, this has been absolutely extraordinary talking to you today. And you know what? You have so many more things I know to talk about, and there's so many things like that. But I want to do it again, hopefully down the road, not too long from now. And I think that people have really been informed about a little bit more about, who you are and your passion. But we got a lot more to talk about today, and maybe not today, but in the near future and everything. But you have any final thoughts about to the kickboxing community and to those people out there who support you, even if it's just a thank you?
Well, obviously, thank you, because without them, none of us would be existing. Our promoters are doing a great job. To me, there is no final thought, because as you know, all these years, my brain is always, what's next? What's the next move? What do we got? What do we got accomplished next? It's never been an individual thing. It's never been a me thing. It's always been a we thing. If you ever hear me talk about anything, I'm always talking about, well, we are going to do this. We are going to do that. So if all of us would learn to take on that we concept, the sport would grow. And the problem is in the sport, the biggest problem right now is there's too many I. There's too many people who want to be just the king, and rather than share the concept, basically. And if we can all get on board and be a we, then the sport is going to grow. But probably the biggest downfall is, I post it on Facebook all the time, is the crabs in a bucket thing. Every time I see a promoter making great strides and doing great things, you got one of these crabs over here pulling them off the edge of the bucket, because they're going up and trying to be successful, and no one wants to let that guy be successful. If we all would help these people, up the walls and promote them as well, because we're only promoting each other. And every time, don't get me wrong, I know exactly what it's like to be that crab pulling the guy off the bucket, because we all had that jealousy thing when we were younger. But my God, that was when we were younger. So let's get over that and let's move forward in
Right.
our sport, and let's be a little more mature and try to help everybody else grow.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Well,
so.
I'll tell you what I want to say is thank you, right? Because I'll be very honest. When I started promoting here some years ago, and Steve, I've been totally loyal and committed to the letters of the IKF and the Steve, and what we do. I've traveled across the country and I still promote IKF. I mean, that's just what I do. When I started promoting here, it was Steve in the background, was the person that was putting me out there, writing these articles and putting things out there and doing these really nice setups for my events and stuff like that and helping me coordinate. I didn't do it by myself, right? Even over there in my East Coast Classic, which he allows me to do and everything. I mean, I still have major support here from the IKF and from Steve Fossum. So everything that I do, everything that I've done in this sport from, the time that I retired and promoting and everything has come from you, my friend. And I certainly appreciate it. And I want to say it right here live so everybody knows that I'm not just doing it. I'm not just out there. This guy kicks my butt every single. He's still waiting on the results, right? From the Spring Classic. I've just been so busy, been trying to get him in. Trust me, it is not him. It's me. He kicks my butt every single time about getting in results, about making sure that I'm following the rules and regulations set by the IKF when we're doing full contact events. All the stuff is coming from him. So I just want to thank you for all the things that you've taught me, over the years for this sport. So we're not going to get emotional here. We're not going to cry. But I am appreciative of everything you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for being a part of the first edition of Johnny Davis Live here from California, right here at IKF headquarters. We've been speaking with IKF CEO, Mr. Steve Fossum. Coming up next, though, we're going to bring on the CEO of Black Belt. I just called it Blackout. Blackout Fights, guys. He's a man with the gear, with all the good stuff that's keeping fighters safe. Coming up right here next on Johnny Davis Live. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys. This is Johnny Davis, and I'm checking out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.